was the last time you heard your heartbeat? It's a sound that, although is ever present, we've become so good at muting it out that we don't even hear it. So much so that we look for stimulation in the form of anger, of fear, of stress, of anxiety, for us to hear our heartbeats again. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Nozipho Mbanjwa, and I'm a conversation strategist. I work with governments and businesses around the world, building strategies and executing against those strategies using the art and the science of conversation. Simply put, I help smart people have simple conversations that make the world a better place. And in my work as a conversation strategist, whether I am moderating global conversations or facilitating strategy sessions, I am doing what you see on screen now. I am speaking. And so for the longest time, I have come to believe that the greatest contribution that I have to give to the world and the value that I unlock for my clients has been my ability to speak, to articulate my thoughts and to articulate my ideas. And I think that you can probably imagine how this has come to be. You and I live in a society that values speaking over listening. When we come across young children, we look at these children, we pick them out in the crowd, and we tell them that you are smart and you are going to go far. When we come across exceptional speakers, we reward them with more and more platforms for them to share their ideas. We even invite them to TEDx and TED Talks so that their words can reach thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And so, having been raised in this society, I have built my entire brand and my entire career on the thing that society values the most, speaking. So you can imagine how we even go as far as reducing critical moments in history to just sound bites that were spoken by leaders that have had an amazing impact on the world. I have a dream. Never and never again. Yes, we can. And so you can imagine the absolute confrontation to my heart and to my mind when I came across these words. I was driving, and in the background, David White, who is a world-renowned poet, but potentially is more known for his work that he does with the courageous conversation, spoke these words, and he said, a conversation is listened into existence more than it is spoken. A conversation is listened into existence more than it is spoken. And I was really confronted and challenged by what I was hearing. Personally, I had to begin to question the thing that I had been purporting to be my purpose, the thing that I had built an entire career on that was now threatened at being unraveled. Professionally, I had to go back and look at the tools in my shed and ask myself the question whether I was investing in the right tools of my trade. Was I paying enough attention to listening as a skill and a distinguisher of what I do as a conversation strategist more than just speaking? Fortunately for me, even though I didn't like what I was hearing, I couldn't unhear it. And a seed had been planted. And that seed began germinating into an awakening and into a journey where I've had to become conscious of how I listen and how I build my ability to listen. And so today I'm here to share with you 3 insights that I have gotten from this journey of consciousness, 3 things that I'd like you to think about, and that I believe that if you are conscious of them, today you are going to walk away hearing your heartbeat and hearing the heartbeat of those around you. And these 3 things have been potentially the most challenging things I've had to do as a professional. The first of these is that I've had to learn to silence my own voice. I've had to learn to listen with my whole heart. And I've had to learn to believe my ears. And you're probably thinking right now, what is Nozi going on about? So let's start off with silencing my own voice. All of us here this morning are not empty cups, just waiting to be filled with the ideas and the thoughts of those that we're going to be listening to. We all have an internal voice, and that internal voice is always on broadcast. I like to think of my internal voice as smart, efficient, predictive, sometimes even cheeky. I like to think about her as something that sounds like my mother might have in her earlier years. And what she does is that she helps me to quickly process what I'm hearing into understanding. She turns the words that I'm hearing into meaning. She's so efficient and so predictive that she's listening out for patterns of words and phrases that reinforce that which I already know, that reinforce the things that I already hold to be true, and that reinforce the beliefs that I have been raised on. She's so good that when I hear things that I don't agree with, that I don't understand, that challenge my beliefs and that challenge my truths, she mutes them. And she turns the volume down, so much so that I might not hear it altogether. And so as a conversation strategist, I'm learning that in those moments where I have managed to silence my voice, in those moments where I'm not just listening out for patterns to reinforce the things I know and believe, in those moments when I'm not holding up my truths as a benchmark to judge everything that I'm hearing, in those moments, I am truly vulnerable. And I'm also learning that I'm more effective as a conversation strategist when my mother's voice is not in the room. And in moments where I've managed to silence my own voice, I give myself the opportunity to listen with my whole heart. What does this mean? If we think about the work of Ernest Hemingway, he introduced us this idea of the iceberg model. And Hemingway said, if you really want to understand why people behave in a particular way, you can't just look at the behavior at the top of the water, because that just represents the 10% which is the tip of the iceberg. You've got to do the hard work of going underneath the waterline and going to engage with the 90%, which is the values, the beliefs, and the fears of that person, and how these are translating into the behavior that we're seeing on the surface. The exact same principle holds when we listen with our whole heart. If you just focus on the words of what a person is saying, which is the tip of the iceberg above the water, you're actually not truly hearing what this person is communicating. You've got to listen beneath the water. You've got to listen for the value that they're upholding in that moment, and ask yourself, what is important to this person, and how is this reflected by the choice of words that they're using in this moment? You've got to listen for the belief. Why is this person framing their phrases and their responses and their questions in this way? What is the belief that all of this is embedded in? You've got to listen for the fear by looking at how they either embrace or resist ideas in both the spoken and unspoken ways. And what I'm learning in the process as a conversation strategist is that there's a deeper frequency of listening, a deeper frequency that sometimes is not detected by the ears at all, but can only be detected by the heart. Remember this moment. When was the last time somebody you cared about said, "I love you"? And in those 3 words, you also heard, "I don't want to lose you. I can imagine a tomorrow with you." In those moments, you were listening with your whole heart. And then thirdly, I'm starting to learn to believe my ears. What does this mean? You know how sometimes somebody says something that is so offensive, so rude, so untrue, and sometimes is so unkind that the immediate reaction we have to it is, "I don't believe my ears." In those moments, we are holding up a shield of disbelief as a defense mechanism to stop us from having to engage with the potential truth that may lie in those words. When someone calls you a racist, when someone tells you that you are incompetent at your job, when someone tells you that you love one child more than the other, in those moments, we hold up our shields of disbelief. But just imagine if we created the space to engage with those words and to potentially not only ask ourselves the question, why am I reacting in this way to these words, but to also build the courage to start another conversation with ourselves to say, how might I have shown up to create the perception that is now being replayed back to me? And so in my work as a conversation strategist, I don't have the luxury of a shield of disbelief. I have to listen even when I don't like what I'm hearing, and I have to engage even with words that I might find unjust and unkind. And so I stand here today and I think, my goodness, how do we get this right? I certainly haven't gotten it right. I'm more conscious of it and I'm working on it every single day. But it is a struggle, and I'm making big and small improvements, one conversation at a time. But as South Africans, I think we have it in us. We've done it before. We've listened loudly before. We've listened with our whole hearts before. We've believed our ears before. Remember the 11th of February 1990? When Nelson Mandela left Victor Verster prison, I would imagine that after 27 years in jail, he would have had a few choice things to say. And instead, he silenced his own voice. He silenced the justified anger and the pain of the moment and chose to tune into a collective conversation, a conversation that would transition us into a new era altogether. Remember the 27th of April, 1994? When millions and millions of South Africans took to the streets to go and vote in for a democratic South Africa? I can imagine that in those queues, there were lots of conversations, lots of chitter-chatter. But I asked one of the teachers in my former school yesterday, what do you remember of that conversation on that day as you stood in the queues? And she said, I don't remember the words. I remember an irrational happiness. In that moment, we as a country showed up with our whole hearts, and we had a conversation that couldn't be detected by the ears. The chitter-chatter in those queues as they shuffled along didn't actually matter, because the real conversation was happening beneath the waterline. The irrational happiness, the fear, the doubt of what this moment represented. And remember, the 2nd of November 2019, when we finally began to believe our ears. Remember, there was a time when we couldn't believe that rugby was not the preserve of Afrikaner nationalism. Remember, there was a time when we couldn't believe that we actually needed a quota system so that black and brown players would have a fighting chance on the rugby field. Remember, there was a time that we couldn't wrap our heads around the possibility that a black man could raise the Webb Ellis Trophy as the captain of a rugby team in South Africa. But what we did is we dared to put down our shields of disbelief, and we dared to interrogate a different conversation, and we dared to find the courage to start new conversations. And so for the very first time in history, because of that courage, we're able to lift that cup as a team that is truly reflective of who we are. So I am confident. We have the ability to silence our voices. We have the ability to listen with our whole hearts. We have the ability to begin to believe our ears. And I know that it starts with you and me. And speech therapists say that it starts with conversational repair. And conversational repair could start right here, right now, as I get off stage. For you to be mindful of the listening person that you're bringing into the conversation, more than the listening, but more than the hearing or speaking posture that you potentially would have stepped into the conversation with. May you find the courage to listen loudly, and may you find the courage to listen with your whole heart. Thank you for listening to me today.